All right, Timothy Carroll here again from Carroll Consultancy Group, and we have with us the extraordinary osteopath and naturopath, Matt Walden. And he's been sharing with us the 6 principles of health. We've touched on 5, and we're now at the final one, 6th, which is thinking right. But it'd be great for you to give us a recap and help us to understand the relationship between them all as well, Matt. So welcome for our final session.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So, like I said, with all of them, it's good to know that you've got these 6 foundation health principles and that you need to do each of them right. But the question is, how do you do them right? And so we've obviously been through moving right, eating right, sleeping right, breathing right, and drinking right. So they're kind of foundational in order to be able to think right. So you've got to get all of those right in order to have a functional mind. But actually, a functional mind is what allows you to make the right choices to eat right, to move right, to breathe right, to sleep right, and to drink right as well. So they're all reciprocally interdependent with each other. So, if we start out with eating right, when you eat balanced foods, so foods that have a good balance of macronutrients and that are healthy for you and that are whole and natural and have good enzyme and vitamin and mineral content, well, then that gives you all the fuel that you need for your brain to work optimally. Often the brain goes a bit haywire when we have too much sugar, for example, and you can't concentrate, you feel ADHD. There's lots of research on this in children, of course, that when they have too much sugar, they can't concentrate in class, that kind of thing. Well, the same applies to adults, where it's, and we're not just talking about sugar in terms of table sugar, we're talking about cereals. Most breakfast cereals are packed with sugar. And it's almost like eating a bowl of sugar when you look at how it affects your physiology. So that's an example of something that, culturally is quite normal to have a bowl of cereal for breakfast. But the reality in terms of how that impacts on your cognitive function during the day is that has a terrible effect on your cognitive function. You're not going to get close to your potential if you eat breakfast every morning in terms of your standard sugary breakfast cereal. So that's an example of eating right affecting thinking right. If we look at breathing right, well, breathing right, when you breathe too much through the mouth, when you breathe at too high a rate because you're a little bit stressed out about things, when you are blocked in the nose and you can't breathe effectively through the nose, therefore you breathe through the mouth, and that means that you go into a fight-flight state, well, then you can't concentrate properly because your body feels like it's under attack. You feel threatened. So you can't make good decisions. You can't stay focused on a single task, and so on and so forth. So that's an example of how breathing right affects thinking right. Then we've got sleeping right. And sleeping right, of course, we all know that a good night's sleep makes you feel good, makes you able to function better the next day. And when you don't sleep so well, you can't function so well. And one of the important elements of sleep is that the second half of the night, from around about 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. is where you get most of your psychogenic repair. So the first half, really from about 10 p.m. to about 2 a.m., in that realm, you are mainly getting physical repair. So you're repairing the aches and the pains and the stresses that you put on your body during the day. But then the second half of the night is more psychogenic. And indeed, what you tend to find when people have things like anxiety or when they have things like depression, they tend to wake up early, or they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't get back to sleep in that second half of the night. So it's a kind of, again, a bit of a reciprocal relationship. The anxiety can drive the sleep disorder, but the sleep disorder perpetuates the anxiety or the depression. So that's a connection between sleep and thinking right. Then we've got moving right. Okay, so moving right, of course, we mentioned in that section that moving right allows you both to get a sense of kind of rhythm and get you out of the room where you are confined for most of your working day, so it actually gives you headspace. Like a lot of people say, I need to go out and get some headspace. And that's absolutely right. That's exactly what exercise does for you. More technically, what it does, it integrates the 2 hemispheres, especially when you do things like walking or running, to a lesser degree cycling, maybe swimming. But from an evolutionary perspective, we are essentially running creatures. That's how we've evolved to be. So walking and running is what optimizes our brain function the most. And when we move, we secrete something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Wow.
And what that is, it's obviously a long name, but brain-derived, so it's from the brain. Neurotrophic means it feeds the nerves factor. So it's a factor which feeds the nerves from the brain and in the brain. And so by exercising, it stimulates brain growth, right? So essentially it's absolutely critical for us to exercise to have optimal brain health and therefore optimal, function in terms of thinking right. So then the last one there, so we've got think right, we've got breathe right. Sorry, so we've got, what have we done so far? We haven't done drink right. So drink right is the last one, right? Okay, so drink right. One of the things that we know is that you only have to be 1% dehydrated to go into a state of depression, okay? So dehydration has quite a significant impact on your mood level. And so the interesting thing about this is a lot of antidepressants actually have a diuretic effect. So in other words, they're actually making you more dehydrated whilst trying to make you less depressed. But depression itself can drive, or rather dehydration itself can drive depression. So, you're much better off to get the foundation health principles right before you go on to something like medication like that. Just on that point, just so that we're, crossing the I's and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. What we need to do is we need to say if someone is on antidepressants, because it's a very common prescription, you should never come off them cold turkey. That's a very dangerous thing to do. If you do want to take more of a lifestyle approach and a coaching approach to work with mental health, you should always come off medications, both with your doctor's support, but also very, very gradually. If you come off suddenly, it can make people feel suicidal in some cases. So that's one way that hydration can link in with thinking right again. So do you want me to expand further on thinking right? Or?
That'd be great. That'd be excellent. Yeah. Obviously, the mind runs the body, and we're mind body beings. So it meant, the mind body connection, which Dr. Deepak Chopra has been so prevalent in. Would love to hear more in depth over the next 5 minutes or so around thinking right. It's critical.
Yeah, it is. So there's a couple of things that I bring up. The first thing is related to a definition of mind. And so Dan Siegel, who is a psychologist and has worked with a lot of think tanks around the concept of mind, he and his think tank honed and refined a definition of mind, which ultimately they tuned down to mind is an embodied and relational, it is the embodied and relational flow of energy and information.
Right.
Okay. Or in fact, if I think about it, it's a process. So it's an embodied process, which
doesn't have to be perfect, mate.
I've lost the definition in my mind. Funnily enough.
Fine. Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we get the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an embodied process which regulates the flow of energy and information. That's the definition. And so, if you break that down, what it is that mind is not in the head. Mind is in the body. It's embodied, and it regulates the flow of energy and information. So in other words, when we're dealing with information all day long and we're trying to put energy out in terms of our actions, we're receiving energy from other people, whether it be them complaining about stuff or giving us credit for stuff that we've done and encouragement and all the rest of it, that's impacting on our body at all levels. It's not just in the mind. So depression isn't just in the mind. It's not just in the head. It's in the whole body. The whole system feels fatigued and depressed. When you're anxious, it's not just in your head. It's the whole body feels anxious and on edge. And so it has an impact on all of these other areas. So when we're talking about thinking right, then we can't think right without thinking about the entire body. It's not a matter of just mind games and mind tricks and this kind of thing, or let's say head tricks. Dan Siegel makes the point that the mind is not an enscolled process which regulates the flow of energy information. It's an embodied process. So that's the first point I wanted to convey. The other thing that I think is really useful to understand is that if you have a sense of purpose, which most business leaders do, of course, because that's why they've become leaders, because they've got a drive and a goal and a sense of purpose. What we know about that is that it actually reduces the stress on the body. And so stress in the body, the technical term for it is called allostatic load. And we can measure allostatic load using various tests that people would be familiar with, things like, measuring blood sugar, measuring blood pressure, measuring cholesterol, various things to see how much stress the body's under. And so if we measure people today, and one set of people have a purpose and a goal, and then we measure another set of people who have no purpose, they don't really know what life's about or where they're going. If we then measure them in 10 years' time, what we find is the group that have the purpose have a lower level of overall stress. Okay, so essentially by thinking right, by creating plans, by having goals, having focuses, having purpose in life, then that is what helps to reduce stress on the system, because typically we then make better choices so that we can actually meet our goals, so we can actually perform to our optimum. So we go to bed that bit earlier, and we eat that bit better, and we exercise that bit more, because we look after ourselves that little bit more, because we feel that we intrinsically have value and that our life intrinsically has purpose, because that's what we've done. We've set a purpose for ourselves. So that's an example of thinking right, and I know that's what your work's all about.
Exactly. So yeah, purpose equals performance, and
yeah,
the more meaning we have in our system, the more our life is full of meaning. And so that's what purpose is all about. Is it's the highest level of meaning a human being can have. And when we have that, then we have a meaningful life, and we operate from a place of high performance. So I couldn't agree more, mate. That's huge. And yep, the mind and thinking right. Every cell in our body listens to every thought that we have. And as Mr. Chopra says, if we want to look at our thoughts yesterday, we look at our body today. If we want to look at our body, and if we want to know what our body will be like in the future, then we look at our thoughts today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's basic. It's interesting. Any other tips on thinking right? What would you say is the most important in these times now? Because fear is a big issue for people. We're being broadcasted fear through the media. It's everywhere. What would you say is, how do we not get caught up in this fuck everything and run game, which is what fear stands for? Or is it really false evidence appearing real? So how do we overcome it?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is false evidence appearing real, but I think what's important is to take ownership of it, and to not be so in psychology, that there's a concept called transactional analysis, which I know you're aware of, but it's the idea that we can interact on a parent, adult and child level. And so if you are talking to someone and you're talking down to them, then that's a kind of parent-child relationship. If you are an adult and you're talking with another adult, that's an adult-adult relationship. But one of the issues with the medical system is that we tend to have a parent-child medical system where the doctor is in charge and tells the child what they should do. So as opposed to having a coaching relationship where you're saying, well, look, if you do this for yourself and you do that for yourself, then you can improve in this way or that way. So, as we see with the COVID situation, we're told, you guys, you need to lock down. You guys, we'll treat you. You guys, they're banning health information from the internet. I've got lots of colleagues that have put out various posts about how to improve your immune function, how to, control your thoughts to minimize the risks of your immune system dropping, which is all valid stuff. There's plenty of research that shows this, and it's been taken down because there's this kind of paternalistic medical system that's saying, no, we can't have that. We're going to work with it in our way. So my view is that you need to not behave like a child. You need to behave like an adult. So don't let people dictate to you in that way. You have to do your own research. So rather than listening to the medics or listening to me or listening to the internet or whatever, you go and you search and find out, well, what are the different options that are going on here? What are the different perspectives? What makes sense based on my understanding of the mechanics of the world? And then you get a much better sense of what's really going on behind the situation. Of course, no one knows exactly. So I don't think, well, I say no one knows. Most of us don't know exactly what's going on. And of course, time will tell. So I think that's one element to it. Is it's important to take that adult stance that you're going to take responsibility for your own health and for your own understanding. And I wouldn't just go to one news source, and I wouldn't just use mainstream news sources, and I wouldn't just use mainstream medicine, because all of these things have their own inherent biases. Just like I wouldn't just use alternative medicine. You know, I would look at everything and then create your own integrated understanding of what's going on.
So through education then, mate, what you're saying is through education, you're actually, you're becoming more aware, and that supports in reducing fear and becoming less fearful, because you're upskilling or up-knowledging yourself, if that's a word, up-knowledging. Becoming more aware, basically. So, excellent advice.
Well, and you know, it fits on the whole model. When you look at where our belief systems have been for the last few hundred years, they've primarily globally been on the idea that the power is outside of us. It's in a god in the sky or multiple gods in the sky. And sure enough, the medical system has built itself upon that same model, where the power is outside of the patient. It's all in the doctor, okay, or all in the medicine. It's not in the patient's own ability to heal themselves. And so again, that's exactly what you're seeing at the moment, that the idea that all the power's in the COVID-19, if you get exposed to it, it will kill you, right? And that just isn't accurate at all. We're exposed to viruses the whole time. We've got viruses in our body that if they overgrew, they would kill us instantly. You know, things like MRSA or MRSA, which kills people in hospital the whole time. 33% of the population have that up their nose, you know? So a third of us are walking around with it, and we just don't get ill from it because our immune systems are doing what they're supposed to do, you know? So same with COVID, and this is what the research is showing in various places like Iceland, where they've tested more than a fifth of the population now, and they find that 50% of the people have already had it, and they've had no symptoms at all. You know, it's like, okay, so what happened there? If it's so treacherous and so destructive, and so, the power's all in this COVID, and we're completely disempowered, then why haven't all those people in Iceland died? Well, because they've got immune systems, and that's not how it works, you know. And that's
basically what we've been focusing on together over the last 6 sessions, is really empowering people with knowledge to be able to boost their immune systems, to understand how to have optimal health and optimal immunity, and really to be able to live a high-performing, happy, wholesome, fulfilled life. So, Matt, thank you so much, mate. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on our Snack Bite training series. And this knowledge is going to be empowering so many people. So thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me at mattwalden.com. I've got it on my badge here, but it's Matt Walden, Matt with 2 T's, Walden with 2 L's, and it's .com. So yes, that's where they can find me.
I heard you've got a great podcast, which I've been recommending to people as well.
Absolutely, yes, with some amazing guests, including yourself. So we've got, it's called FC20, which stands for From Chaos to Order. So we're trying to make sense of the chaos out there. So FC20, if you just tap that into any podcast provider like Apple or Spotify or Stitcher, you know, then it will come up, and you can have a search through the episodes there. But yeah, fantastic.
Awesome. So thanks so much again, mate, and I look forward to staying in touch, and wonderful. Take care, buddy.
Thank you for the invite.